Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. My name is Annie O'Donohue, and I'm filling in for Nicole as she is at jury duty today. And super excited for our guest, Rafe Williams. Welcome. I was asked to do this. I've been a Prevent+Ed team member for a little over 4 years. I run Sands Bar, and I think I think there's a few reasons, is Rafe will be headlining. Would that be the correct term?
Yep.
Hosting, headlining this Friday, March 3rd at 7 p.m. at the Burgess Theater at Coca for our young professionals or junior board, YPPE, for their first fundraiser for Prevent+Ed. They're doing a comedy show. And I signed up, or I asked to be able to find the comedians because I take improv classes, which is very different from stand-up comedy. But I'm like, I can find good people. And whenever Andy Slowey of the Improv Shop gave me your name, Tina's name, a few other names, I was like, it has to be Rafe. I've seen you perform. I know of you just through the Improv Shop. So here he is, and we're going to be just talking about all things improv, comedy, sobriety, a bunch of stuff.
Stock tips, everything.
Yeah, so...
And kudos to Nicole for being a good citizen.
Right?
And fulfilling her obligation of jury duty. I weasel out of it any way I can. I've
never been asked. I've had to, but I lived out of state, and I'm obsessed with Law and Order, so I really want to. So I feel like because of that, I've never been asked.
I'm surprised.
Right?
They asked me this year, and I was like, that's how you know your sobriety has outlived some of your shame. And I was like, man, did you guys do a background check?
Right?
There's a couple DUIs floating around out there. I would think you wouldn't even ask me to be on, but
maybe
they're getting desperate.
Maybe there's a reason they haven't asked me.
Yeah, it's possible.
I hope my mom's not listening to this. So I've been wanting to do an episode about comedy, improv, all of that.
Sure.
And how it relates to mental health. Because, like I was saying before, I've had friends. When I lived in New York, I was in the restaurant industry. So I was friends with actors and comedians and all of that. And I learned that stand-up, that comes across as so just, shooting the breeze, just making this up on the spot is so rehearsed, and how vulnerable you have to be to workshop your material.
Sure.
And how a bunch of comedians that I know are sober, and I just knew them from working with them or just being sober myself. That seems really cool, and it seems to be kind of like a laugh at my pain,
Sure.
Laughing at, let's say your childhood or your family is very therapeutic. And then on the other end, taking improv, and I know I'm covering a lot right now.
Sure.
But, I would say the principle of improv is yes and. We always yes and.
For sure.
Right?
Yep.
And so for me, I've been really trying to apply that to just my life. If someone presents an opportunity, yes and. Yes, we'll see what comes of it. So...
Sure.
Let me backtrack. Rafe Williams, you may have seen him on Up Late, St. Louis.
STL Up Late, yes.
STL Up Late.
Digital Channel 4.3. I was on a show called STL Up Late that was in the coveted 1 a.m. time slot between Andy Griffith and Chuck Norris's Total Gym infomercial.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And that was all sketch.
Yeah, that was kind of a late night talk show / sketch. So it was if SNL and The Tonight Show had a baby in St. Louis, that was our show, kind of. It was very St. Louis centric. We had St. Louis musical guests. And then we had a host who would interview one St. Louis celebrity. And then we would do sketches in between. So it was pretty cool.
Do you ever think that will come back?
I mean, I would love it if it did, but no, I don't. Everyone has kind of moved on. Some of our cast has gone to Chicago. It wouldn't come back in the same way, but we have done live shows. We've done live reunion shows, which are fun because we started live in the Satori Art Gallery on Locust, got a cult following, it turned into a TV show for seasons 5 and 6 and 7. But our
Wow.
first 4 runs were live, and we did it in front of a live audience, and it just kind of picked up steam like that. So, and we've come back and done reunion shows or some version of STL Up Late, and those have been fun, but everybody's kind of moved on to greener pastures. And I mean, yeah, in a perfect world on Netflix, I would love to do it.
Well, speaking of Netflix, that sketch, stand up, you've got your own album, Young Grandpa.
Yep.
I saw that you recorded live from Zanies, which is on Peacock.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. It was on Circle TV, and then Peacock bought Circle, one of those conglomerates where big fish eats little fish. So it's on Peacock now. Yeah.
You've been named like one of St. Louis's funniest people, and you've opened for a bunch of comedians. But I bring up Netflix because you've been at a bunch of festivals, and Netflix is a Joke was one of them. Yeah,
it was super fun. Crazy. There's no way they could do it every year. It was the most like jam-packed festival I've ever. There was like a night that I was like, do I want to see John Mulaney and Earthquake at the Hollywood Bowl, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler do live comedy, Theo Von and Andrew Santino at another theater, or Ben Schwartz do improv. And that was all. Those shows were all happening at the same time.
And
like
you were part of that
LA.
lineup.
I was. I opened for Trailer Trash Tammy at the Regency Theater, and it was a cool experience. It was cool to be part of that. And I shot a special last year in Edwardsville at the Wildy Theater, and Netflix was looking at it for a while. They eventually passed, which doesn't surprise me. They're kind of like star bangers, for lack of a better word, which I totally get. But it's those things where like little failures or things that feel like a disappointment at the time lead to other things. And I'm going out there in March to record like a 7-minute showcase for Netflix that's going to be on their Sirius XM channel. So it's like, sometimes you don't get the thing you want in the moment that you want it, but it leads to something better. So you have to be patient. That's kind of how comedy is. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot.
And to just think, I want to hear how you got to where you are today, but
sure.
Netflix passing on something is it's still a huge thing. Like Netflix was watching your stuff. So you've done improv.
Absolutely.
How did you get into the world of all of that?
All of what?
Funny, I guess, for lack of better words.
Well, so not to bum anyone out, but I didn't avoid the stereotypical comedic journey. There are some comics that were fully formed, grew up in a great household, had no childhood trauma, and good for them, Jerry Seinfeld. But
those are very rare.
They're very rare. I'm like I'm very stereotypical chestnut. Grew up in kind of an abusive home, had a very domineering father who kind of shadow loomed heavy on our household. I was the oldest of 3 boys, and I realized early that I would make fun of him or impersonate him behind his back and to my mom and brothers, or I would just do characters and kind of make my mom and brothers laugh. And I realized that comedy was kind of a reprieve from heavy stress. Mm-hmm. And, I went to school, and I was the class clown at school. I did a lot of goofing around at school and stuff like that. So early on, I realized you could weaponize comedy to alleviate suffering. And that made me feel good. It made me feel like I was doing something. And I think there's a lot of suffering in the world. And if you can, any art that alleviates a little bit of suffering, I think has tremendous value, even if it's just, talking about farts.
I agree. I've got this magnet on my refrigerator that says the shortest distance between 2 people is a laugh. And I think you can make somebody laugh, or 2 people are laughing. Like there's something magical about that. There's something magical about comedy that it, going back to your childhood, it like took you away from that, and it took your mom and your brothers away from that, and just for momentarily you forget the stuff that's going on. Right.
It doesn't mean that at 4:00 when he gets off work, we're not all in a world of pain, but it's like at least at 2:00, we cannot be thinking about it.
Right.
And it carries over into other parts of life
Of
too.
course,
You know,
of course. So you went from class clown to then what?
well, that was a long journey between that. You know, I talked about this a little bit last week, but
Side note: this is Rafe's second time sitting down with us, so
yeah,
thank
we
you.
don't have to. We can cut that out. I wrote a letter in third grade. You know, when you write a letter at the beginning of school and you're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then
Yeah.
you read it at the end of the year to see how much you've changed.
Yeah.
Mine was comedian. You know, usually it's like fireman, astronaut. Oh, wow. I wanted to.
First
Mine was
president.
comedian, and it was comedian at the end of third grade, and that envelope never changed for me. But
Wow.
I grew up in a very rural, I would say impoverished area, coal mine country after the coal mine shut down. And the reality of being like a performance artist was not really, it just wasn't, and it wasn't that people were not supportive. It was just like that seemed like such a huge pipe dream where I grew up, that you kind of get put into these other molds. It's very blue collars. Like you need to go to work. You need to either go to work, you go to college, you go to the military, right? And I fell into that. You know, I went to the military. I had a son at a very young age, so I was kind of like trying to figure out life, and I didn't really get into comedy until I was like in my 30s.
How did you know what a comedian was in third grade? I don't think I would have known a comedian or stand-up
HBO.
comedy.
You have to have one rich friend. That's how we gauged. That's how I gauged wealth.
Yeah.
At childhood was like who had HBO
cable, yeah.
and who had a pool or a trampoline. Like that to me, that was like your father must be a Saudi prince for all I know.
And name brand food.
Oh yeah, if you had cereal that if you had Lucky Charms and not
Right.
magic shapes,
You had it made.
Yeah, you were doing something. Your dad was successful. So I remember watching like Andrew Dice Clay and knowing that I was seeing something like bad that I wasn't supposed to see at a very young age, late at night. But then George Carlin came on after that, and I remember watching George Carlin when everyone else was sleeping at a slumber party, and feeling like he was talking to me, and wanting to wake people up and be like, "Hey, this is something. This is different." Like I knew that what Dice was doing was funny, and like it was saying naughty words, but there was something about what George was doing that was different, that spoke to me. And then I just got really into it, and I started, seeking it out, finding whether it was, sometimes it was just like an old album, record that went into a record player that like I would listen to, or my friends would have, or we'd sit in the parking lot and listen to Dennis Leary's or Adam Sandler's cassette tapes.
Wow.
Of like their comedy tapes and thing, and I watched Saturday Night Live religiously as a kid, like I didn't go out on Saturday. I was watching it from the time I was in fourth grade on. So, you just got exposed to it. The internet wasn't really banging, Netscape Navigator was not going to let you just stream comedy 24/7. So I just had to get it where I could get it,
Okay, so fast forward, you're a dad. You're a young dad, so by the time you get to your 30s and you venture into comedy, just
Sure.
one day you were like, I'm going to do comedy? Like,
well, in the throes of the worst parts of my addiction and alcoholism, I was just getting like untenable at the end, just becoming a caricature of myself. I always say that like I became that drawing at the state fair where your head's really big and your body's small and you're riding a surfboard and there's beer cans all around, and it's like I became like a sad caricature of myself.
and I don't know about you, it's almost like, for me, I could see myself, like, not an out-of-body experience per se, but you can just see yourself.
I had that in a moment of sobriety, yeah.
Yeah, like, what am I doing with my life? And,
Sure.
I can't turn this off. And, like, the caricature, it's very eye-opening.
Yeah, and believe me, it wasn't an overnight epiphany. It was a lot of people. I had a friend that loved me enough to have a conversation with me and say, man, I think you could be the funniest person in the world, but you're going to settle for being the funniest person in the bar.
Wow.
And that makes me sad for my friend. And, of course, in that moment, I was like, fuck you, man. You don't know me.
Right.
Because it hurt to hear that and know that it was true.
Right.
And then you get to a moment with, not to over dramatize it, but it's like when I finally had that moment where I was getting so far gone that It was almost like two people live inside you.
Yes.
And there was a moment that I felt like I almost had I wouldn't call it a psychotic break, but I would say that I definitely had a moment where I looked in the mirror and I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, and I was like, one of us has to die.
Yeah.
And we're at the point one of us is about to. I've taken it to that point where I was like, either this caricature, alcoholic, sad clown that you've turned yourself into wins, and the real Rafe has to die forever, or you have to draw a line in the sand, dig in, and push back. And don't get it twisted. You are fighting for your life.
Yes.
And I know that sounds very dramatic, but that's how it felt in the moment to me. It felt very real to me in the moment.
I don't think it sounds dramatic because I've had the exact same thing happen.
Sure.
And I think maybe to those who don't understand what addiction or alcoholism or substance use disorder is like, it does sound dramatic, but like I would never wish my worst enemy on this. And so I completely, like, you just transported me to that moment for myself. So
a similar experience, probably.
Yeah.
Well, good. Then I'm not completely batshit insane, which is good to know about
or we both are.
Yeah, that might be. Damn it. So that was kind of what spurred the foray. You know, I know I'm trying to watch my language here, but it was kind of a shit or get off the pot moment where it was like, dude, you're 33 and you know that this is your calling. You know that this is what you want to do. But I was scared, you know, and I was like, because if I failed at that, it mattered. Anything else, any other job I got fired from for not showing up or, you know, and the thing that I hated about myself is I had become reliably unreliable. And that is a tough thing to process, like, from who I was as, like, 13-year-old me. I'm like, man, if he saw who I became, he would be so ashamed of me. And you can get that credibility back. It takes time. It takes time and a shitload of effort. But you can win back your reputation and your credibility. Will always be people who remember you and want to remind you of your lowest moments because they're sad people.
Right.
And you just got to take those on the chin sometimes. I still see people 12 years into sobriety that'll be like, man, last time I saw you, you pissed yourself at Greg's party. And I'm like, hey, Frank, thanks for bringing that up in Walmart, dude. Really nice to see you 12 years later. Like, you know, it's just like, but some people you're frozen in that moment in time for them. But for the most part, people will respect and appreciate that you've made strides in your life.
Yes.
So I had to go for it with comedy, and then crippling stage fright because I don't have the booze to lean on, right? You know, and I talked about this before, but you get to that point where, like, they say that public speaking is the number one fear. Like the old adage is like, if you're at a funeral, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, right? Because the fear of public speaking is greater than the fear of death in the public.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't mind public speaking, but
that's good. You are an anomaly.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't. And then if you add on the consequence of public speaking of everyone expects you to be funny, not only are you have to get up and talk in front of everyone, they expect to be rolling with laughter. That's the expectation. Not a surprise. It's not like they're watching. You're giving a college, hell, what do they call it? Commencement speech or something, and they're like, "Oh, that guy was kind of funny. I didn't expect that." They're coming expecting you to be funny. The pressure is so high, and your nerves get shot. You know, it feels like you're going to fight a lion when you're going up there. So I had to figure out ways to manage my stress and my mental health to be able to and I just did immersion therapy, and that's kind of how I got into improv and how I started doing Toastmasters. I was looking for a stand-up comedy workshop and stumbled across the improv shop in its infancy when it wasn't a brick and mortar place. It was more of
Pat's? When it was above
Pat's? It was even before Pat's.
Wow.
It was before we were doing it above fried chicken joints. It was still almost an ephemeral we were bouncing around town doing classes and doing shows at different venues that did not want us there. Back of bars a lot of times.
And you're newly sober.
Pretty newly sober, yeah. Yeah. I took a year. I got sober in 2011, and I took a year.
Congrats.
To get it. Before I added anything to my plate, I just took a year to get my shit together. Then in 2012, I started stand-up, and then in 2013, I started improv. So I have a decade of improv. I just realized that the other day.
Wow. And over a decade of comedy.
Yeah, over a decade of comedy. And, well, I guess if we take away COVID, I don't know how that works out. Because I did do a couple Zoom shows, but, man, it didn't feel like
Zoom
comedy.
Zoom shows are so awkward.
Oh, awful.
Oh.
And we had to pretend like they weren't, which was the worst part.
Yeah.
But all of those things led me to, I'm like, it's almost just like, if you're scared of swimming with sharks, swim with sharks. You know, that was kind of like, until it feels
Just
normal. And that, it worked. Because in improv, you share the responsibility of the funny, so it didn't feel as, and you take the wins and losses as a team. It's not, you don't have to bear that burden of the weight of like, ugh. Because when you bomb in stand-up comedy, the audience is saying, we don't like you. You're not a character. You're not playing a guy in a play. You're not playing a wacky neighbor. You are just being you, and an audience is rejecting that. And it's like, that can hurt so bad. And you said something before we were on the air, which I thought was like kind of a really brilliant thing I hadn't thought about. And I was like, it's funny to me because improv is making it up on the spot and making it look like you're not. And stand-up is doing a very rehearsed act and making it look like it's made up on the spot. Because that's the magic of stand-up is, can you communicate in a way that it feels like these ideas, it's the first time you're expressing these ideas. It doesn't feel choppy and robotic and rehearsed. And then improv is like, you're literally just flying by the seat of your pants. But if you do it well, at the end of it, people are like, no way.
Right.
You guys rehearsed that. And I was like, no, that's the magic of improv, of good improv. And there's bad improv too, believe me.
Of course. I've been a part of some of it. Stand up, like down to the like waiting a beat. Like it's that rehearsed, right?
It can be, yeah. People work different ways, but
so
I would say for the most part.
Bombing on stand up, that has to affect your mental health. And like, I mean, I would not be able to do that today. Improv, I've noticed personally, and this is where, you know, clearly some therapy is still needed, which I've done lots of, but like thinking, and I'm only on level 3. So like, I'm not, I think there's 5 levels. So
yeah, 5 or 6 now. They've changed the curriculum around. That's okay.
But like, I'll be like, oh, my group doesn't like me, or, oh, they didn't want me to say that. And it's like, it's very mental, you know, and you have to be like, one of my instructors said, like, your group will never be like, that wasn't good. It will be like, what could we change? Or, I mean, because you taught improv, right? You taught, I know you taught sketch comedy there, which I really want to do. It's just so tied up in our own ego, really, and how to like let that go.
Yeah, and that's why I think stand-ups have a hard time doing improv sometimes, because stand-up is very much, you are ship captain and crew, good or bad. You decide what is said, when it's said, how it's said, and who it is said to. And then I think a lot of stand-ups, it's really fear-based. They get into improv and they're like, oh, this sucks. It's stupid. And I'm like, nah, you just didn't want to relinquish control. You didn't want to collaborate. And it's scary to collaborate and fail. It's scary to put yourself out there and say a line that maybe may not be intrinsically funny and count on someone else to finish the joke for you, or vice versa. Someone else is coming at you with something and you have to accept it and figure out a way to find the funny. And that could be terrifying to someone who's used to standing up there and saying, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This is my joke. I rehearsed it in the mirror at home, talking into a hairbrush, and I know exactly how I want to say it. But it's all fear-based. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Everything in life is fear-based. I mean, why are we drinking? Why are we snorting, partying? Whatever your destruction of choice is, like, it's usually fear-based. It's you know, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, that my addiction and alcoholism was a symptom that became the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was me hiding my head in the sand, probably on some childhood stuff I wasn't dealing with, and also probably not doing the thing I knew I was meant to do.
Right.
And trying to reconcile that and feeling like a failure, or feeling like I was living someone else's version of me. And then at some point, the thing I was numbing the pain with became to the front and center.
Right.
I was like, oh, now this is the problem.
Right.
The other thing is now is orbiting
Yes.
booze.
Yes.
Where it used to be the other way around, and you don't know when it happens. It just happens. There's like you cross this event horizon where you're like, oh boy,
right?
Booze just became Jupiter,
right? And it perpetuates it and
sure.
it adds to it, and then all of a sudden you're like,
sure.
I've got issues with this now and that now.
Sure. And you know, she asked me last week, and it was a good question, so I'm going to repeat it.
Yes.
She said, "Do you think you would be where you are if you were still drinking?" And my answer was, "Fuck no," because
I wouldn't be here.
I'd have burned my career to the ground 10 times over by now, just from the thing I talked about being reliably unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd have showed up drunk, or not showed up at all, or who knows, said something, you know, on stage that I don't even remember saying. It goes viral, and
you're done.
You know, and there's so many ways to be successful in comedy now that didn't exist 10 years ago. But the downside of that is there's so many ways to be seen, whether you want to be seen or not. You know, like, you can go viral real easy, good or bad. So, you know, it's a business with a lot of money tied up in it. Comedy is still a business. There's people trying to make, you know, the clubs have to make money. The clubs need to sell tickets. They need to have happy customers. And yes, you're an artist, but at the same time, art and commerce meet. And it's like, I would have ruined the commerce side for sure.
Have you seen a difference from 11 years of stand-up? You know, now you can get on Instagram or TikTok, and I can look up reels, you know, that you've done. And a comedian the other day said, you know, it's really difficult now. Like, people are watching comedy like this, you know, like quietly, or they're reading it like, ha, 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 ha. And then you go to a club and you want to like laugh out loud. And if you don't have this over the top, it's like, he was okay.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think it would be a lie to say that comedy hasn't changed, or that the way comedy is being consumed hasn't affected live performance, because I truly believe the best way to see comedy is live. I think it's a communal experience. It starts out adversarial, and by the end, when they don't know you,
right?
Because I'm still at that point. I'm just now getting to where people are starting to come to see me, which is so great.
I'm surprised
just
by
the
that.
last couple of years.
Okay.
I have fans now that come to see me. They like they know what they're getting. Comedy's the only thing. We don't do this with music. We're like, where are you going to see tonight? We're like, music. What kind? Don't know, but it better be the kind I like. I'm like, well, it might be jazz. Well, I hate jazz. Well, then you should probably look it up, right? But people don't look that up. They just say, I'm going to see comedy.
Huh. And there's lots.
And because of the echo chamber of the internet and only seeing the type of comedy you respond to, when you see an artist or a comedian doing something that isn't your wheelhouse, you think your right is to reject it and call it definitively bad, when maybe it just wasn't for you. The same way, like, you may not like the Foo Fighters, then don't go to a Foo Fighters concert. That doesn't mean the Foo Fighters aren't a great band.
Huh.
But that is kind of what we deal with people seeing stuff online. Now, it also makes it able, the good side of that is you can build a fan base on your own. You don't need, the gatekeepers have lost a little power. Good or bad. Like the old system, you have to adapt to as a comedian, because the old system of like, I came up through the clubs and I hosted, and then I middled, which is called featuring. And then after I was really good at that and I could do 30 minutes and crush, they moved me up to headliner, and it was almost like a farm league, like, you know, AAA Memphis, and now you're the headliner. Those days are starting to wane, because there's just too many people building their own fan base, and at the end of the day, you got to sell tickets, so
not just for you, comedy overall. Now there's like just 3 people performing instead of opener.
No, there still is openers, but I'm saying like it used to be you move through the progressions.
Oh, I got you. Yes.
Of like, well, I hosted for a few years and I got really good. Then I featured for a few years and I got really good. And then they moved me up to headliner, and the club did the work to sell the tickets, and you put on a good show. And there are still clubs like that like they're the draw. Mm-hmm. People come to this club because that's where they come for date night, for comedy. But more and more with Instagram and social media and things like that, people are coming to see the person.
Right.
They're coming to see the person that they saw on their phone on the toilet. They want to see that person live. And sometimes that person's not even a comedian. Sometimes that person is a TikTok star. Sometimes, right. And I don't have any ill will towards those people.
Right.
Like some comedians will be like, I don't like when these TikTok, YouTube people come in, and I'm like, yeah, but all they have is the thing we all want, which is an audience that loves them, right? I want that. I've done my time proving it to people. Like I've gotten up there, because comedy at its core, when it's live, it almost starts out like, make me laugh, clown boy. And then you get them laughing. They're like, I love this guy. And
you can feel it.
You can feel the room change. Mm-hmm. And that is the magic of live comedy. Is a friend of mine told me one time, another comedian, and it was really, he goes, we're the closest things to wizards that exist in the world. And I was like, well, let's not. And he goes, we are, man. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know about that. And he goes, well, we change people's blood pressure with words. Huh. And he's like, we say a spell, a joke out into the air, and we change people's complete mental attitude. We change the air in the room. And he goes, tell me anything closer. And I was like, well, all right, well, you got a point, I guess. It's like you say you're changing people's state of mind with words, and you're changing people's the way they're breathing. Huh. You're getting a what would you call laughter? Like an involuntary response out of a person with words.
Right.
And he's like, that's basically just you casting a spell on someone. He's like, granted, they're not falling in love with you, and they're not.
You never know.
But, there is some magic in that. And that's why I think live comedy, there's always diminishing returns when you watch like a special. Or I think it's a good way to get it out to the masses. But I would always be a proponent of go see live comedy, because that's kind of where the magic happens in the room. And, that's another downside of that we have to own as comedians. I see a lot of videos that are like crowd work. Comedian owns heckler. It's a lot of like comedians interacting with the crowd, and like I don't particularly do that. Most comedians don't, and they don't like their show being interrupted, because comedy has a rhythm and it has a. But then I'm like, well, I'll be comics like, man, crowds are getting worse. They're talking all the time, and I'm like, yeah, but that's all we post. We're posting videos of us talking to the crowd. So if you're if you've never been to a live comedy show, you think that's what it is. You think you show up, you talk shit, we have an interaction, and you're part of the show. And that's fine. There are some comedians that do that, but that's like a downside, I think, of the social media stuff.
I went to the Funny Bone last weekend, and these people just kept talking, and I'm like, that is against the rules. That is not what you do at a comedy show.
Right.
Like, shut up. And I didn't think about that. I was just like, oh, I guess St. Louis. Sometimes I get super snobby because I lived in New York.
Yeah.
And that's all about ego for me. But I'm like, maybe this is like a St. Louis thing?
Nah, that's an everywhere. There are some people that just don't know how to be in public also.
Oh, and COVID didn't help that.
Yeah. Like I did a show in Cincinnati with Jeremiah Watkins, and a lady got kicked out. And she was incredulous. They had talked the whole show. Full volume. Not even about the show. They're just having their own town hall meeting. And they finally kicked her out.
Good.
And on her way out, she was, she's like, this is bullshit. Yelling at him on stage. And he's like, you're bullshit. You've been talking the whole show. We've been trying. She's like, you're telling me I can't come to the show, order a pizza, and ask my mom how her day is.
No, you can't.
And he was like, yeah, no, that sucks. Go to a restaurant. Like you're at a show. Everyone else paid to hear the comedy, but some people really, there are just people like that. There's no amount of any training you can do, but you also have to
Yeah.
train audiences on how to be at a comedy show.
Okay, so back to the mental
So if you
health.
come Friday,
I won't say a word.
y'all be quiet. Let me do my thing, and we'll talk after the show. Unless I talk to you, in which case it means I'm probably not doing well.
Right. Speaking of
And I need
Friday, Tina Dybel,
D-ball.
D-Ball.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
That's okay.
And Mike Anthony.
Mike Anthony, correct.
I have told so many people in all areas of my life, and so many people are like, "Oh my God, hilarious!" Saw them, fly over. Saw
they're
them
great.
here. Yeah, no, all three of you. Like, it's been really cool because
You're really getting 3 headliners.
I know.
To be honest, I get the
know.
ego of it, but Tina and Mike are headliners in their own regard. So
Well, and the way the flyer was set up, I was like, "Oh, I don't know politically how that works," because I think it said,
great.
okay, because I know I had reached out to you and was like, "Oh, you and Tina, are you Tina and Libby?" And you're like, "Yeah, that's 3 headliners." So when I saw that Tina was on there, I was like, "Oh,
well, she's getting ready to go out on tour.
I know," and
So-
she's with Tammy, right?
with Tammy. So
Yes.
we got lucky and asked her, where I was like, "Do you want to just tune up and come do this show?" And she's like, "Yeah, that sounds great."
She's
and also,
amazing.
she's been sober as well. She kicked heroin in her teens,
Incredible.
which is tough to do.
Yeah.
And so she understands that world too. And Mike is also sober for a few
Oh,
years.
that's right. You told me that.
So, and none of us are going to talk about it.
Which is
Well, we might talk about it a little, but not a lot. It's not a big chunk of any of our acts.
Well, and it's not a sober comedy night. And I know we talked at length. It's like,
Yeah.
I've been to sober comedy nights, and it's one thing, I want to, my whole, with Sands Bar, which we do alcohol-free events for anyone over 21 and up, I always want to bring everyone together. So I think for so long,
Sure.
us sober people, we're over in that corner. And it's like, I don't want that to run my life. And so, like, I think you can be sober and be a
Yeah.
successful comedian and not have it overlap. It will probably overlap, like you said,
Sure.
because it's just part of your life.
For sure.
So I'm really glad. I think it's amazing, and I know I'm talking your ear off.
No, you're good.
I think it's amazing that the 3 of you you've all had your own journey with addiction, substance use disorder,
Sure.
and how you've all come on the other side and look at you now.
Yeah, and it's always day by day, but at the same time, like, and when it comes to our comedy, I can speak for myself and tell you that I always say I'm sober, not square. So it's like, I try not to make, because so many, and it's okay if you do this. If this is what keeps you sober, then do this.
Right.
But it is not my personality. My personality is not my sobriety. And sometimes I think it's the same thing about, like, the alleviating of suffering, right? Like, we all suffered. That's why we're sober now. We've all been through some sort of
Right.
suffering. To just swing the hammer right hit the nail on the head for an hour and tell jokes solely
Right.
about, like, being sober or when I wasn't sober, it can be cathartic. And I don't have any problem with jokes like that, but I don't necessarily want to beat people over the head with them. We're all
Right.
just trying to have a good time because you
Right.
can just have fun. I'm a lot more fun now that I don't
Oh,
drink
yeah.
because I'm not a bull in a china shop and people are like, "Oh, you're fun to be around." You didn't
Right.
get past that point of no return where, like, now it's like,
You're not.
yeah, now I'm wrangling you for the rest of the night and it's not fun. Now
Right.
you've given me a job to do. So, I want people to come to the event expecting just to have a good time.
Yeah.
And that we're all, we all have journeys, and I would love to talk about sobriety and stuff after. If anybody wants
Yeah.
to chat about it, I'm always open to that. But just come to laugh and have a good time, and it's not PG. I think we should
Which
talk
is
about
great.
that because
I don't think it should be.
you're not coming to see Jim Gaffigan. I'm not a filthy, filthy boy, but I am not going to do 20 minutes about Hot Pockets. So
Right. It's comedy.
don't bring your kids. That's all
No,
I'm saying.
right. And the drinks are all alcohol-free, but for anyone over 21. So speaking of drinks, I want to end with a question of, you bartended sober. I know
Yeah.
I have tried that in my life, and it has not ever worked. I had to go after many times of getting sober and then getting behind the bar and that sobriety ending. I just ended up being on the floor serving.
Sure.
I've seen you at the improv shop, and I sound like such a stalker, but I've seen you used to bartend.
Yeah, I helped set the bar up. Like when we finally got brick and mortar places, John Langan and I kind of got the bar up and running, and just because we had experience in that field, because it was it's such a community there that it was kind of like, well, what's your background? All right, well, you can help with this. So you do drywall, maybe you can help us fix this.
Right.
Oh, what? And everybody kind of chipped in their expertise besides comedy, because we didn't have, Kevin McKernan's the owner. He started a Craigslist ad to teach comedy after he got done doing IO in New York.
Right.
Or excuse me, in Chicago. And so a lot of I call us the old heads, that were, when it was very much touch and go, it didn't have the two theater, brick and mortar, paved parking lot.
Yeah, that just got paved.
Yeah, like, it's weird. I always tell them I feel like it's the movie X-Men, where I'm like, I somehow became Professor X when I'm like, no, I'm Wolverine. I'm like the wild card guy. And they're like, nah, man, you're a teacher now.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not a teacher. I'm crazy. And they're like, yeah, but like these kids look up to you, and like you got to teach them how to do improv. And I'm like, I don't like this.
You are a legend.
But it's like, well, legend's a stretch, but thank you. It's just like it became an institution, and we don't know when it happened. It was just a thing. We were like, man, this is so ephemeral, and like this could end at any moment, and let's just put on as many good shows as we can. And through the hard work of others, it became a thing. And tending bar, I think I was able to. I also worked at a place called Lori's Place in Edwardsville, and I was a very raging drunk when I worked there, and I got sober when I worked there. And it was a mom and pop place where people cared about me, and I think that worked to my advantage. I had people around me that cared about me and knew what I was trying to do and supported me.
Yeah.
And kept an eye on me and kept me honest. And honestly, another weird thing, and I've talked to other people that have gotten sober while working in a bar. I found it helpful because I got to see at about 1 a.m. an example and a stark, harsh reminder of the guy I never had to be again. There was always one, or girl, wasn't always guys. There was always one
we have problems too.
Falling down, drunk, who was like interjecting in other people's conversations and thinking they were crushing it when people were like, dude, get the fuck away from us. But like, all right, anyway, they loved me anyway. Who else wants to love me tonight? And like I got to see someone stumbling around the bar making an ass of themselves. And that to me was like a shot in the arm every night of like, that's why you don't do this. You don't ever have to be that guy again, man. You gave yourself the gift of never having to be that guy again.
Bartending is a lot like babysitting 2-year-olds, like
for sure
when they need to eat. Oh, get no notice. So I'll just end on this. I think, thank you for all that you have done, and thank you for headlining.
Yeah, I'm pumped about
Friday.
it. I hope people come out. If they don't, who knows?
Thank you for opening up to us. And, I think thank you for creating the community that is the improv shop, because I think it's a good place for people to go and to feel a part of,
Well, I appreciate it. I had a very small hand in that.
You had a hand,
but yeah, it's a great place. It's a good community. And, it is a good thing to do if you're newly sober and you're trying to like branch out and get a new community, because I know that was a big part of my sobriety. Wasn't necessarily chemical dependency as much as the societal implications of me not drinking. When you're the party guy, or you're the, you lose your booze friends. You lose your, people who do heroin hang out with people who do heroin.
Right.
People who... You rarely see a mixed bag where they're like, well, this is Doug, he's into heroin, and this is Molly, she's a fall-down drunk, and me, I just love cocaine. It's like you very rarely see that group of folks.
Right.
It's usually, you run with people who are into your drug of choice, and then like sometimes you have to pull the ripcord and get away from folks, even if you love them,
right,
to keep yourself sober, because they're not ready. They're not where you're at. They're not ready. And sometimes they got to disconnect from you because your sobriety is a reflection of their weakness.
It makes them very uncomfortable.
And it is very hard because I've lost friends. I have friends still that, I get 3 a.m. texts and I'm like, let's have lunch tomorrow. Let's talk. And then I get the 8 a.m. text like, hey, don't worry about those texts last night. And I could tell they want it and they want to find it, but they have to find it on their own terms. And it's hard. Can't force it. And the improv shop is it was a good community for me to surround myself in while I was in the early stages of sobriety, because I was only about a year in when I started finding these folks, and like they will support you on whatever path you're on. They understand whether it's mental health, stuff like that. I mean, obviously improv is not therapy. Some people have made that mistake in the past because there is a vulnerable element to it. Go to therapy, but also do improv. They can work together. So yeah, if you're out there, you're listening to this and you're thinking about doing something cool, check out the improv shop. Take level 0. It's very low. Level 0 is for like, if I'm terrified to do this thing, you can kind of get your feet wet. You don't have to perform in front of anyone. It's in a closed environment and you'll feel very supported and loved.
Yeah. It's I took an improv class before I moved back to St. Louis and really liked it. But it's hard to meet people in St. Louis as an adult. And I did it just to meet people, and it's such an inclusive community that I've really enjoyed it. Yeah,
there's a nice Venn diagram of, because it's a small city, like when you do improv in New York or you do improv in Chicago or LA, it's all people who want to be professional comedians or actors. And the stakes are kind of like, the stakes are so high that it can feel competitive.
Yes.
Whereas here, there's a nice Venn diagram. Like there are some of us in that professional arena, and then there's some of us who probably have the talent, but they're not going to leave their job at Wash U to make no money as a comedian. And then there's people that enjoy just being part of the community, and the improv is just a bonus that goes with it. And there's a nice little crossover of those folks. And because of St. Louis's general Midwestern friendly attitude, I think some of the pitfalls of other larger improv scenes go away, which is like, we're all here to hang out, have a good time, love each other, and laugh. And you can find your niche. If it's the people that are going hard, then be on a team that's going hard. If it's people that just enjoy hanging out once a week and sharing their lives together, you'll find your people.
Yeah, no matter what age.
No matter what age,
I've got 2 people in my class who are probably in their 70s.
Yeah.
And they're out there killing it.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, well, Max just came over and gave me the eye. So I've talked to you.
He gave me the finger. You guys couldn't see it. Pretty rude.
Thank you so much for coming on twice.
No problem.
And you can hear more from Rafe on this Friday, March 3rd, 7 p.m. Doors open at 6:30. It's going to be a great show. All proceeds go to Prevent+Ed, which if you like this podcast, if you could please like, subscribe, share, help get the word out, that would be great. And see you on Friday.
Review, comment.
Yes, review, comment.
Engagement.
Send to your friends. Post on social media. So yeah, thank you, Rafe.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Of course. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.